Let's try this Ukraine video, shall we? Because I heard it was bad. It's by a guy who is picking his nose. Ukraine, the Unavoidable War by Boy Boy. Okay. Okay. Let's go. This guy's a fucking weirdo. Oh no.
I wasn't. Do you know there's a war? Yeah, there's a war. There's a war going on in Ukraine.
War has returned to Europe.
Okay. He's a fucking Australian.
Russian tanks and troops rolled across the border.
Russia is facing allegations of war crimes.
We're escalating towards World War III.
Here in Ukraine.
All this bloodshed and carnage just came out of nowhere.
Did it? There was a civil war happening for 8 years. Okay. Nice.
What the hell was that?
Putin is a monster. He's unleashed hell in Europe, and the question is why? Why would he do that? Well, if you ask the oldest and wisest man in America, the president, he'll tell you that Putin did it for no reason.
Putin's latest attack on Ukraine was totally unprovoked.
But 25 years ago, this same guy...
Unprovoked doesn't necessarily mean no reason, right? If you rob someone's house, it might be unprovoked, but there's probably a reason you've done it, right? Okay. Strike one.
I predicted this is exactly what would happen if the US expanded NATO into Eastern Europe.
And if there was ever anything that was going to tip the balance, were it to be tipped in terms of a vigorous and hostile reaction in Russia, it would be that.
So what the hell's NATO? What does this all mean? And what did Biden know 25 years ago that
Yeah, I feel like this... Okay. He's going to prompt me to say the thing, so we'll just give it a minute.
doesn't know now?
So the best way to get something done, if it holds near and dear to you that you like to be able to... Anyway.
Well, to find out what's going on, we got to go way back to the Soviet Union in the 90s, back when Russia and Ukraine were part of the same country. Now, there's a lot of nice stuff in the Soviet Union, like oil, gas, coal, and grandparents that look like this, all of which make it the most resource-rich nation in the world. And now that the US won the Cold War, the Americans had two options. One was to start a new world of equals without war or exploitation, and the other option was to plunder your old rival and make lots and lots of money. Now, if you want to make lots of money in the Soviet Union, the first thing you need is a really, really drunk dude called Boris. He'll do whatever you say, but the problem is, no one likes him. Like, how do you get an unpopular loser like Boris into power? Well,
Couldn't you also say that Russia's way of getting out of the Cold War was plundering all their old satellite states? Okay.
you got to spend money to make money, right?
And like right from the fucking get-go, from 1992 onwards, like as soon as the Iron Curtain falls, you've got Russia trying to like grab onto whatever the fuck it can with like Transnistria and fucking Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan and fucking like later on in Belarus, Chechnya, like it was like right from the get-go. So
And Boris's friends in the White House slipped him a sneaky $2.5 billion donation, allowing him to monopolize every media outlet and bribe anyone who needed to be bribed. Now, $2.5 billion obviously sounds like a lot of money, but the Americans got a lot more in return. You can do pretty much anything now that Boris is in power. Like, even when 77% of the country votes to keep the USSR together, Boris can ignore that and go get drunk with just 3 dudes. And all he has to do is just open this document. Just open it up, just concentrate a little bit, just get it open. Yep. And once it's open, he can sign it and dissolve the Soviet Union himself. And this is where things got really... dramatic. It's time for capitalism, baby, which meant selling trillions of dollars worth of Russian assets to private companies. But as they were sold off, all these assets wound up in the weirdest places. I mean, take 26-year-old Boris Jordan, for example, an American who worked for the bank Credit Suisse. This kid ended up owning 10% of the shares in Russia's newly privatized companies. Now, how the hell does a 26-year-old end up buying 10% of the world's biggest country? Well, it turns out this kid was shopping at Crazy Boris's Bargain Basement. Now, only 10 very special people were allowed to shop here. Just 10 of Boris's American and Russian friends were now the sole owners of the entire Russian economy. Not only did they get it all basically for free, but they were also given a really cool new nickname, Oligarch. Now, things were obviously amazing for these 10 dudes, but it wasn't quite as good for the remaining 148,317,990 Russians who woke up in a country that had just sold everything it once had. Food, healthcare, wages, all the vital parts.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's like stories about this happening during this point where people were trading bottles of vodka and shit because like instead of currency.
To your life that you took for granted yesterday had suddenly evaporated. Now, Boris conducted what numerous historians have called the greatest theft in world history. Hyperinflation hit 2,323% overnight. Everyone's savings were wiped out in a day. If on Tuesday you had 100 rubles in the bank, on Wednesday you've got 4. It was complete chaos. I mean, poverty grew faster than anywhere in the world at the time. Life expectancy dropped by 10 years, which has never happened to a country in peacetime. I mean, GDP fell by 50%. To put that into perspective, when Hitler invaded Russia in World War II and killed 26 million people, GDP only fell by 24%. This is goddamn crazy. I mean, the Americans and the oligarchs made a killing, and the only thing they had to do to, keep the money flowing was just to keep an eye on Boris and make sure he didn't drunkenly stumble in front of a bus or something. But it wasn't all smooth sailing, right? Soon enough, the democratically elected Russian parliament realized that Boris had created a humanitarian catastrophe, and they barricaded themselves in the building trying to impeach Boris and bring the country back to normal.
I think you can use this narrative to like, I don't really know if there's anything I need to fact check here, but one thing you can say about this whole period, and Yeltsin kind of did capitalize on this a little bit, was that the kind of cope for Russia being in such an economically dire situation, like basically turning into a gangster capitalist hub, was that the people had to be sold something by the regime, and that something was nationalism, Soviet nostalgia, imperialism, and that kind of, you could say that does explain some of Russia's actions from 1992 onwards. Yeah.
Now, if you want to resolve this kind of delicate political situation, you need to be subtle and calculated, and above all, very, very careful. Woo! So Boris got his tank and blew up the parliament, massacred a bunch of politicians. He did such a good job that his mate Bill Clinton called him up instantly and congratulated him on his superb handling of the situation. Now, the situation didn't change much for the rest of the 90s. Russia was a poverty-stricken wasteland ruled by murderous gangsters. But in 2000, someone new would show up. I mean, he's still a murderous gangster, sure, but he was killing for different reasons. He was the anti-Boris, and he wanted all of Russia to know that he was a tough guy. He doesn't drink, his nipples look like this, and he's here to discipline the oligarchs and bring the Russian government back in control. And people were into it. I mean, like, freakishly into it. Obviously, you have to ignore the repression and poisoning of political opponents, the suppression of independent media, dodgy elections, creeping authoritarianism. But compared to the horrors of the 90s, Putin gave Russians a normal life. Well, normal by Russian standards. But at the end of the day, if it wasn't for the US, a dickhead like Putin would have never needed to exist.
Okay, wait, why have we blamed this on the US again? Is it basically because they didn't do a Marshall Plan? Because I feel like the Russian leaders of the early 90s were kind of complicit in selling off everything to the oligarchs. Like, that's kind of like, I don't know why those leaders are not accountable. Like, they have agency and shit. Okay.
And now that Russia was recovering, Putin was getting a bit antsy that the US would be back with a vengeance.
A Marshall Plan was super augustry. Unironically. Would it have helped though? The problem, I think, I read about this a really long time ago. I don't even know if it's true. I'm pretty sure the difference between somewhere like Russia and China was that China started its transition to capitalism by privatizing small kind of consumerist enterprises at first and then slowly expanding. Whereas with Russia, the first things to go were oil and gas. So when you've got a state that runs everything, and then this situation where they can just transfer everything en masse at once to a small handful of people who had the money and were in the right place at the right time, then yeah, you do kind of end up going from just like one kind of autocracy to another. Yeah.
Now, once upon a time, there was like a safety buffer between the two powers, with NATO on one side and the Warsaw Pact on the other. Well, I mean, they also touch over on this side, but that doesn't matter. No one cares about a frozen wasteland like Alaska. Now, when the Warsaw Pact disbanded and Germany joined NATO, the Soviets were assured that NATO wouldn't expand further east. But, you know, they did it anyway, because Russia...
Fuck off! This is the dumbest fucking take. Oh my god. Oh no. It's funny how he's shitting on NATO, this NATO promise, right? We've done this a million times. We know that the expansion eastwards, the promise not to expand eastwards.
The Soviets were assured that NATO...
When everywhere east of East Germany was in the Warsaw Pact. The only place to expand eastwards to was East Germany, and that's where they promised not to expand eastward in. It was in reference to East Germany. Whereas the person who reinterpreted this promise, which wasn't written down, which wasn't clarified or anything, which wasn't actually set into stone or like properly defined, the person who decided to interpret this promise in this way was Yeltsin. Yeltsin was the one who said it was the spirit of the deal. And if you're a leader saying, no, it was the spirit of the deal, you're coping. You are giga coping. How fucking stupid do you have to be? Okay, fuck.
Wouldn't expand further east. But, you know, they did it anyway, because Russia's completely backwards, and what are they going to do about it, right? But everyone from prominent foreign policy experts to senators, military officers, and diplomats, and even the guy who designed America's whole Cold War strategy, they all argued that expanding NATO was a tragic error of historic proportions and that it would start a war in Europe. But you know, that didn't stop them. You know, after years of rampaging around the world, blowing up Yugoslavia, Afghanistan...
Isn't it weird that they say this like the expansion of NATO would start a war in Europe, even though NATO expansion started like quite a while ago? The war was quite recent. Yeah.
And Libya, Somalia, Yemen.
Hey, Droner Box, are you actually... Get in the hell. Oh no.
NATO now had their missiles 400 kilometers from the Russian capital. And watching all this, Putin obviously realized that there are no rules. It was the law of the jungle, baby. And so, like any great jungle standoff, Putin cried and surrendered and tried to join NATO immediately. I mean, they didn't let him join, so Putin was kind of fucked.
Okay. It's not that they didn't let him join. It's that Putin wanted to get in without applying. The open door policy was there for a long time, and Putin didn't want to apply. He wanted to be given special privileges.
Fucked. But the plus side for him was that the average Russian was terrified of NATO expansion.
Wait, how many strikes are we on now? Like 3? Yeah.
Every time NATO blew up a hospital or a school somewhere, Putin's approval rating went through the roof. But now, across the border in Ukraine and all over Eastern Europe, the 90s were pretty much identical. Everyone got into hard base, they started squatting, and got absolutely ransacked by oligarchs. But the main difference in Ukraine is that they never had a Putin. Ukraine was the land of 100 Borises. Now, the country was split between Russians in the east and Ukrainians in the west, and all they wanted to do was just punch each other in the head and endlessly swap between either pro...
This is also, like, when you appeal to this, like, Russians in the east and Ukrainians in the west. Like, this is kind of true, but the problem is using this as a justification, which I imagine this guy's going to do, using this as a justification to break off these parts and give them to Russia, is basically why are there mostly Russians here? And one of the reasons for that, well, we know this is a lot to do with Stalin, and even beforehand. And we know that this old part here is because after the Holodomor, a lot of those dead farmers were replaced by Russians.
East and Ukrainians in the west. And
so I don't know what the rationale is. It's like, oh, we did some imperialism like 100 years ago or 50 years ago. Now we should just do some more on the basis of what we did in the past. It's really fucking dumb.
Now the country was split between Russians in the east.
Sorry, the hullabaloo at the door. Yeah, my Jordan Peterson.
And Ukrainians in the west. And all they wanted to do was just punch each other in the head and endlessly swap between either pro-Russian or
They did fight in Like, and the politicians used to fight a lot, didn't they? That's so funny.
Pro-Western oligarchs, making Ukraine the poorest country in Europe. You know, it was an endless cycle. I mean, Yanukovych was a pro-Russian, corrupt asshole who hoarded all the
Yanukovych.
country's mansions, luxury cars, and microphones, I guess. So they had a revolution to kick him out of power and replace him with a pro-Western Yushchenko, who ended up being so corrupt that they kicked him out and went back to Yanukovych, who they kicked out 6 years
Yanukovych.
earlier. But something weird happened in 2014. It was revolution time again, and pro-European protesters came out in Kiev to try and topple Yanukovych. And like any corrupt oligarchic government, he responded with incredible violence. These people are getting brutalized here. Surely there's someone who's strong and brave enough to defend these weak, squishy pro-European protesters and defend them from the police. Well, lucky for them, there's another group of pro-Europeans in Ukraine who came to help. In fact, they're so European that they reckon that Ukrainians and Europeans are part of some kind of master race. You see, the last time Ukraine was independent was when a big group of Europeans made it their mission to bring civilization and a new order to Eastern Europe.
Don't show the election results. Don't show the results after 2014 when the far right got like 1% of the vote. Please don't do that. No, you couldn't possibly do that. Oh no. Do you know the only people who say that the far right were instrumental in the Maidan revolution were fucking Nazis? The Nazi leaders themselves, leader of the right sector, said, we did like 80% of the work or whatever. It's like, oh yeah, okay, wow, the Nazis were so crucial to the Maidan. Said the Nazis. Wow. Soy.
I think they were called Nazis or something. And some Ukrainians were so thankful for their independence that they celebrated by killing hundreds of thousands of Jews, Poles, Gypsies, and Russians. And then the Europeans said bye-bye and continued their journey eastwards through Russia, where they killed another 26 million Russians. Anyway, there are a lot of tough boys in 2014 that were very proud of this history.
A lot.
I think they were called like neo-Nazis or something. And while the regular pro-democracy protesters were squeamish and unprepared to fight, these boys had been training for this their whole lives.
Wait, do they think the people who... Do they not think that the regular Maidan protesters weren't fighting? You can see fucking videos of people who don't have fucking Nazi symbolism all over them running around with shields and shit. Like this was like lots and lots of people. This was like the entire town square full of people with shields and like throwing shit at the police and shit like that. Like, does he think they were all the Nazis? What the fuck?
And things went from 0 to
this was like a mass nationwide protest. What the fuck?
100 real quick. Kiev became a war zone.
This is where we look at the fighting and just like put a little magnifying glass over it and find one swastika and be like, oh!
You know, coups and revolutions aren't just about horrible violence. Sometimes they're about the friends you make along the way.
True.
Friends like Vitaly Klitschko. He was one of the original protest leaders, a professional boxer and professional twin. He tried to calm down these new violent radicals, but they KO'd him in one round. He was now being eclipsed by a new string of leaders. Leaders like Oleg Tyakhnybok. Now, this is a guy who liked to rant about exterminating Jews and Russians, and he barely even finished a Sieg Heil with his right hand before John McCain swooped in and shook it. American politicians were now swarming all over Ukraine, ready to fund and support the invigorated far right, which was about to overwhelm the government and force Yanukovych to flee the country. Now, the EU started freaking out. They saw the pro-democracy liberals were losing control to the neo.
Wow, these really influential Nazis. What are we talking about? Right sector, 0.7% of the vote. Svoboda, 1.16. And then we have all these guys. Boom, 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 boom. I don't know. I don't know. You're not really selling that like Nazi-dominated movement there. I don't know.
Nazis, and they pushed for a compromise that would leave Yanukovych in power, but it was too late. Now, the Americans were in charge, and they said, fuck the EU, we're going to back the Nazis. That's literally what they said.
Someone in the US said, fuck the EU, we're going to support the Nazis. That's 3 strikes for 1. Okay. We're going to do the phone call. He did the ringtone. Oh no. Why do people do this? How many fucking times have we seen someone hear a phone call, hear a sentence, and then just add another sentence onto it that's not in the phone call? You can see the entire transcript. It's really fucking... It's really slow. Like it's really short. It's a brief transcript. Why do you need to add sentences in? They said fuck the EU. They didn't say we're going to support the Nazis instead. What the fuck?
Fuck the EU.
See, now this is a leaked phone call between
This is how they all do it. Like, I swear to God, like, tankies. I don't know why they do this. They will hear a fucking phrase and then just say it back to you, but it's completely different. Why do they do that? What the fuck's wrong with them? These are the people who read all the theory. Like, are you not capable of, like, hearing words and then saying them back? Like, why do you have to change the meaning of what? What? Okay.
the US Assistant Secretary of State and the US Ambassador to Ukraine, and they're planning out who they should put in charge of the new Ukrainian government.
Who they should put in charge? Let's find the phone call. Let's do it again. One more time. Newland and Piat phone call. The entire transcript is here. Yeah. This is what they mean. I think Yats is the guy who's got the economic experience. The governing experience. So they like this guy. They like Yats. That doesn't mean they picked him. You know who picked Yatsenuk, the leader? You know who picked him to be the prime minister? The fucking Ukrainians. He was the opposition leader after Yanukovych. He was the second most popular. He was in the second largest party. So when the leader of the largest party leaves, and they completely disgrace themselves and fall apart, who's going to get in? Who's going to get in the next election? Probably the opposition. It's like if there's a fucking anti-Tory party revolution in the UK, and Biden's on a phone call going, "Yeah, I think Keir Starmer's the guy. He's a good guy. Beautiful brick-shaped face. He's." And then Keir becomes the prime minister, and they're like, "Whoa, whoa, oh!" Phone call. Biden clearly saying, "Let's depose Boris with the CIA, and then put in Keir Starmer because he is a Nazi." That's what the phone call said. That's what it said. They would unironically, yeah. Absolute fucking Neanderthals. Jesus. Thanks, Adversar, for the prime sub.
I think Yats is the guy.
Oh, here it is. Yeah, look, it's how we guessed it. This is the bit.
Who's got the economic experience, the governing experience.
Certainly is.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Okay.
Now, this phone call was bad news for poor old Klitschko.
So we've seen the words. Now, why do you have to say something different from what's in the phone call?
State and the US Ambassador to Ukraine, and they're planning out who they should put in charge of the new Ukrainian government.
I think Yats is the guy.
I just don't know. Why do... I would love to just spend like 3 minutes inside the mind of someone who hears those two things and like believes the narrativized bit. I can't. The actual fuck. It's like, you know, this happened in the UK as well. When Corbyn was running against Boris, Trump went on TV and said, Boris is the guy, Corbyn would be a disaster or whatever. I shouldn't really say that part because there will be people who think Trump fucking installed Boris. Oh no. Yats is the guy. We got him. Clear evidence of picking a new leader. Wow.
Who's got the economic experience, the governing experience.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Okay.
Now, this phone call was bad news for poor old Klitschko. You know, first he gets beaten up, then the Americans don't even let him in the government.
So, I don't think Klitsch should go into the government. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's a good idea.
And what do you know? Everyone they decided on in that phone call ended up magically being in charge of Ukraine.
Magic. What? Well, can you believe it? the favorite to win the election, who was also incidentally favored by Americans, won an election. Wow. It could never be me. The leader of the opposition won an election after the incumbents were chased out of the country. I could never. There's no fucking way, unless the CIA, etc. It's impossible. It couldn't. You know what? I'm pretty sure I said before the 2020 election, you can find stream footage of me going, I was a bit more nervous back then. I was like, hey, chat, I'm not American, I know a lot of you guys don't like voting, but, Trump's really bad. I think Biden's the guy. Biden's definitely the guy. You should vote for Biden. I would like to see Biden as the president. And what do you know? What do you fucking know? Fucking Biden becomes the president. Fucking cunt. And what do you know? After fucking Launerbox suggested Biden to be the new president, it just magically happened. Can you fucking believe that, Joey? Okay. Fuck you, stupid cunt.
With neo-Nazis holding numerous government positions.
Oh yeah, these guys were all booted out within the same year as well. This is the interim government. They were all gone within like a year or two. Strike. What were we on? We're doing a dishonest cunt video. So we were on strike 7. Now we're on strike 83. I think that's right. That's a bit accurate.
And the new government didn't waste any time. They got rid of Russian as an official language, started resurrecting all...
Ooh, they got rid of Russian as an official... Oh, that language law didn't come in until 2019. So if they're going to say that the language law was the cause of the uprisings in the East in 2014, it's like I know what he's going to say before he said... Okay.
The old Nazi symbols and praising Ukraine's World War II fascist government. Now, if you want to scare the shit out of an ethnic minority, this is how you do it, right? All over Russian-speaking Eastern Ukraine, people went wild. It turns out they were scared of Nazis and they wanted out of Ukraine, and they were ready to fight for it.
This is a movement that was like funded and armed and fomented by Putin as well. So, okay. Yeah, they didn't get rid of the Russian language. What they did was that they basically took a language that had 200 years of elevated status in Ukraine and tried to counterbalance it with the promoting of a national language. That's what they did. You know what? There's a word for those language laws, right? And this is what happens when you don't fucking listen to Ukrainians. Because I had that Ukrainian on talking about this. Until 2014, like even very recently, Russia has like had like an elevated status in Ukraine, as in there are like lots of top jobs in Ukraine that you can't get unless you speak Russian. Right? Like, so Russian has like this massively elevated status. People get like, you've got like 200 years of leaders like suppressing the Ukrainian language, banning it in some cases, the EMS Act, and then you try to counteract that. Hey, the fuck?
So Putin obviously jumped on this immediately. He was ready to break some rules, American style. He blatantly annexed Crimea, but he had different plans for the east of the country. He pumped them full of Russian weapons and training. They got guns and tanks and guns for their tanks and guns for their guns, plunging Ukraine into an unwinnable civil war. Putin wanted to keep this war going until the new government collapsed. But now was the time for the neo-Nazis to shine even brighter. The new government was desperate to subdue the Russian-backed separatists, and no one is willing to kill and die more than fundamentalist, radical neo-Nazis. Now, it's obviously a bit weird to focus on neo-Nazis in Ukraine, because every country has neo-Nazis, right? We've got neo-Nazis here in Australia. And just like in Ukraine, they're a tiny, fringe minority. But in
Ooh.
Australia, we at least like to pretend that there aren't any neo-Nazis in our armed forces. But Ukraine is the only country in the world that openly has full-blown neo-Nazi formations in its military. Like Azov Battalion, for example, whose leader, Andriy Beletsky, is known for saying all this cute stuff like, it's Ukraine's mission to lead the white races of the world in a final crusade against the Semite-led inferior races. Now, he rounds up a bunch of Nazi football hooligans and arms them using oligarch money, and then his battalion, along with many others,
Yeah, we're just like fucking hot jazz Confederacy music. Oh god. That's fucking weird. They'll never say the numbers, will they? Because the number of like neo-Nazis in the Azov battalion is estimated like it could be as low as 900. Like tops maybe what, 1.5 or 2,000? Ugh. And I'm pretty sure that this Nazi leader of the Azov battalion is gone. Isn't he? Beletsky isn't there. He's not the leader anymore because when the Azov battalion was assimilated into the Ukrainian army, this guy stepped down, didn't he?
led inferior races. Now, he rounds up a bunch of Nazi football hooligans and arms them using oligarch money, and then his battalion, along with many others, is formally incorporated into the Ukrainian army. I mean,
and then what happens after they're incorporated? Does he... Okay.
It's like instead of sending the Marines to fight in Afghanistan, you send the KKK. Now, these guys were sent east to go fight the separate...
Wait, does this guy not think there are KKK guys and racists in the American army? What? Yeah, probably a very small contingent of them are. Yeah, of course every army will have some fucking Nazis in it. I don't understand this whole thing of like purity testing an army when they're defending themselves. The fuck?
Fight in Afghanistan, you send the KKK. Now, these guys were sent east to go fight the separatists, and the US loved it. They were training them, sending them crazy amounts of money and weapons, and just like when the US trained and funded far-right extremists to fight the Russians in the 80s and turned Afghanistan into a mecca for global jihadis, the Ukraine war became the hip place to be for the global far-right looking for military experience to use to terrorize people back home. But that's more or less irrelevant. The real victims here are the people of Ukraine. They're caught in a bloodthirsty tug of war between the US and Russia, with tens of thousands of people dying and terrorized into fleeing their homes. But then, a miracle happened. A comedian called Volodymyr Zelensky stars in a sitcom about a high school teacher fed up with corruption who unexpectedly becomes president of Ukraine. And then the comedian playing the president of Ukraine unexpectedly becomes president of Ukraine. Yeah, Zelensky, a Jewish man, the peace candidate promising to end the war, won with a landslide 73%, while the far right got smacked.
Wow. A Jewish leader of a country dominated by Nazis, apparently. Who could have... It's amazing how this story just kind of all falls together in a very like non-contradictory and totally believable way.
Smashed with only 2%, sucked shit. Everyone from east to west was cheering for the new guy. The Nazis were pissed. You know, once upon a time, they were untouchable, right? And now, when the far-right battalions refused to do a ceasefire, suddenly there was this Jewish dude, the president, on the front lines, getting up in their grill. Now, if there's one thing Nazis hate, it's Jews taking away their weapons. But unfortunately, as hard as Zelensky tried, they'd just break the ceasefires anyway. He was never in full control of his own country. The Americans and the Russians were, and they didn't give a shit. They were just using Ukraine to fight each other.
The United States aids Ukraine and her people so that we can fight Russia over there and we don't have to fight Russia here.
I mean, they were also using Ukraine to make lots and lots of money for their buddies. I mean, like Hunter Biden, right? He's Biden's son, and he's also America's best-looking crack addict. You know, with absolutely zero experience. He was given $1 million a year to sit on the board of a Ukrainian gas company. And when Ukraine's top prosecutor started investigating the company for corruption, Biden withheld US aid until they fired the prosecutor.
Look, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a bitch. Got fired.
Trump did exactly the same thing. You know, everyone was just taking turns just milking Ukraine, just milking it good. Oof.
Oh, God.
Ooh. Anyway, Zelensky's approval...
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Hunter Biden was qualified, but okay. They want to say, because if you can lie about Hunter Biden having no credentials because conservatives are idiots and they see a guy smoking, like fucking taking drugs, and they just think like, oh, he must have no qualifications. Yeah.
Rating was plummeting.
This guy is just like a disgusting human as well.
Right? And he realized if you can't stop the war, you've got to join the war, right? And he got his opportunity as soon as Biden was elected president. Suddenly, Zelensky did a complete backflip. He went full Putin.
And this whole nepotism thing has been has been like, there's nothing there. So far, this has had no standing. Like, that's why Trump withheld aid so he could try and dig up dirt on Hunter Biden.
He arrested the head of the opposition who had just overtaken him in the polls. He shut down opposition TV channels and most importantly, began talks for NATO membership. Now, Putin was absolutely furious. It used to just be because Putin was shit at piano, while Zelensky could do this.
Oh, God.
Now, Putin's dick was obviously too small to play piano, so to compensate, Russia starts building up troops on the border and sends out a draft treaty. It said that Ukraine needs to have guaranteed neutrality and that NATO removes its missiles and battle groups from Eastern Europe and Zelensky never plays piano ever again. Now, this standoff lasted for about a year, and the US spent that year doing what you'd imagine someone would do if they wanted Russia to invade Ukraine. First off, they refused to negotiate.
There are some very obvious non-starters in things that the Russians have put on the table.
But simultaneously...
Yeah, that's just because you haven't listed all the demands. Some of the demands were repeal the language laws. I'm sorry, it's not your fucking country. They can do what they want. The second one was denazify. What the fuck does that mean? Like, that means get rid of Zelensky and put a fucking Russian state puppet back in. That's what that means. The other is, I guess, probably like, what, recognize Crimea and give independence to the Donbass region? Like, why are they not... Why did he only mention the demands that, like... I mean, Zelensky's already conceded that they won't join NATO, and Russia did not just pick up and decide to go home. It's almost as if they're there for another reason, but okay. They wanted 12 nations to leave NATO, did they? I didn't even know that. Okay.
Simultaneously, the US kept reminding Russia that if they did invade...
Oh, yeah, maybe, I don't know what else is on the list of demands. Fucking bring back the Warsaw Pact. Every Warsaw Pact country just come back in. Raise the czars from the dead. I don't know. Fuck.
The US wouldn't do anything about it.
While I will not send American servicemen to fight in Ukraine.
So it became this game of chicken where both sides are flying at each other and Ukraine is just stuck in the middle. And then Russia proved to be the bigger maniac and actually invaded their neighbor. With Russians smashing Ukraine, millions of people fleeing and thousands of civilians dying, a furious Zelensky comes out and reveals that the West was never even going to let him into NATO anyway, but they made him pretend that he was going to.
And the response was very clear. You're not going to be a NATO or EU member, but publicly, the doors will remain open.
The whole thing was a setup, and Zelensky got used in the bloody tug-of-war between East and West. And now thousands of Ukrainians and Russians are dying, and there's a brand new war in Europe. If only there was someone who could have predicted this, someone with the power to stop it.
And if there was ever anything that was going to tip the balance, were it to be tipped in terms of a vigorous and hostile reaction in Russia, it would be that.
Oh, that was a good video, Alexa. I reckon you should get money for that.
Yeah, I think so too. You know, funny thing is, I need money to live. How crazy is that?
I didn't know that.
Alex currently works full-time for I Did a Thing, and I've got a day job, which means I don't have heaps of time to work on this channel, but there's nothing I'd like more than to just do this full-time and bring you as many videos as I can. There's only really two ways to do that, right? One of them is to start a Patreon where we steal money from you, our fans, and the other one is to...
Oh, okay, well done. Beautiful. Wow. Oh, God. Ooh, wow. So Russia has no agency. Ukraine has barely any agency. America's bad. Okay, well done. Holy fuck, man. Australians. I'm trying not to be racist against Australians, okay? It's not going to happen. But god damn it. God damn it. They really pushed the buttons with that shit. Ugh. They're Bosnians, by the way. Well, listen. Whatever Bosnians and these guys died long ago, okay? They are now full Australian, okay? Oh, God. That was intense. That was really fucking bad. Oh. It's amazing how, like, the so-called counter-narrative, what you think is supposed to be, like, the independent, free-minded, left of center, whatever, like, it's just all fucking copy-paste bullshit. Like, you could almost tell which arguments were going to come before they did, which quotes they were going to use, which, like, sound bites they would use for the phone call and everything. It was just, like, one after another, after another, after another. Like, fuck. Like, that's amazing. That's just so powerful.